Welcome to the MOGL podcast. I'm Tim Bryson, Director of Athlete Education and Compliance, and I'm the host of our show. If this is your first time here, welcome. If you're a returning community member, welcome back. As y'all know, the MOGL podcast is dedicated to educating all NIL athletes and brands on how to ensure compliance, how to maximize NIL activity, and how to make a difference in the ever-evolving NIL landscape. Today, we have a phenomenal and dynamic guest on our show today. This guest is the founder of New Game Labs, a platform for creators in sports. Their journey that started in the DMV made its way to Boston, where she was a basketball player on the women's basketball team at Harvard University, and also was introduced into the marketing industry. Her career over the last several years has found her way into being recognized in a number of different platforms, including but certainly not limited to Sports Business Journal, 30 Under 30, Front Office Sports Rising 25 Under 25, and LinkedIn's First 100 Creators. As a speaker on the future of sports, she has shared her insights with companies like Meta, NBA, LinkedIn, Spring Hill, Front Office Sports, and more. New Games Labs is her next step in leveraging content and storytelling to help athletes succeed beyond the game. We debated on making whether or not we wanted to share this episode because this guest is way ahead of the curve every single time. I'm not Drake, though. This is not OVO quite yet. Without further ado, Kirby Porter, what's poppin'? Welcome to the MOGL podcast.
What's up? Thank you for having me. That was an awesome intro.
It was getting there. You gave me a lot of the content. I messed up my Drake verse. So
sounds like I've written that somewhere.
It definitely did, but I'll make sure I inject Drake another part in this episode. But we're happy to have you, yo, right? Happy to have you. I know it's been several weeks since we launched a new episode. I think it's a perfect episode to relaunch our podcast with. And so, as you know, as a podcaster yourself, right, which we'll dive into a little bit later, how our podcast is set up is that segment one is all about you, and particularly your story. So that before we go any further, Kirby, what is your story?
What is my story? For this audience, I'll start with basketball. So I feel like basketball was just like such a great guiding factor and form of direction in my life. It led me to Harvard. It led me to a great network at Harvard. And I think that's where, just as early as my freshman year, honestly, I started to kind of like craft, like, what did I see for myself beyond sports? Because our alumni network for the Harvard women's basketball program was like super tight. So we got to like see our alums and see what they went on to do. And I was always inspired by that. And I was like, I want to do dope things after basketball too. And so starting freshman summer, started interning at the Patriots. The next summer, interned at Under Armour. And then my last summer, I interned at PepsiCo in marketing. And that was just a great way to like do both in college. As I always say, I wanted to be multifaceted as I am right now back then. So I feel like Harvard provided a great balance, being a student athlete, but also finding my passion for business and sports and athlete empowerment. And then after that, started my career in New York. I went back to Pepsi full-time, absolutely loved it there. I highly recommend finding somewhere where like the internship before your senior year leads into the full-time opportunity, because one, alleviates a lot of pressure your senior year to not have to go through the interview cycle. Two, creates this family feel when you come back. But loved Pepsi, worked in our NBA partnerships team while I was there, and it kind of got my wheels turning again on sports marketing. After 2 years at Pepsi, I joined a venture capital firm that invested in sports tech and was leading the firm's marketing. And then in 2022, I started my company that essentially helps athletes with their marketing, but more so through this creator economy, content creation type of way. And a lot of that is inspired not just by basketball, but also my journey as a content creator. I started podcasting back in 2019 when I was at Pepsi. It was called Court to Corporate. It was about athletes in business. And it just kind of helped me build the network and skills and vision required to do what I'm doing now.
It's important. I'm glad you mentioned environments first, because a lot of people start with the people that may have an influence or shape, their career, their life journey to this point. But you mentioned environments like Harvard, like PepsiCo, like the venture capital firm you're working for before. But who are some of the people that did influence you, right? That either mentored and or sponsored you throughout your career up to this point, at least, to where you're now the founder of New Game Labs?
Yeah, a lot of people along the journey. I'll start by saying again with like just the Harvard basketball community in general, whether it was my teammates or the alums. A lot of early mentors while I was at Pepsi that I feel like went out of their way to make sure I was okay and to make sure I was growing and learning. So identifying those mentors early on in your career and being active in them and cultivating those relationships is really key. But also, as everybody says, network across, right? I've always joined communities at each stage of my career. When I was in undergrad, I was in MLT, which is Management Leadership for Tomorrow, which is like a career development program for people that look like us. And that was huge. And I'm still best friends with a lot of those people today. And you know, a lot of them too. So, you know, MLT, when I first started my career, I was like in Brown Girl's Dream. And then being a part of like Sports Business Journal's 30 Under 30 and Front Office Sports Rising 25 Under 25, like each of those things provided communities and people for me to like collaborate with as I was going. And then also the podcast brought a huge network and community for me as I was making my transition out of basketball and just, you know, hitting up people that played basketball at Cornell or, you know, Dartmouth or whatever, like people I kind of knew, but not really. And having that tool with the podcast gave me something to make connections and relationships deeper. So I definitely recommend podcasting as just like a networking relationship building tool.
1,000%, thousand percent agree. Before we move into segment 2, Kirby, without looking at your resume, or excuse me, after looking at your resume or even your LinkedIn, what is something that I and our MOGL podcast community is not going to find about you that you want us to know and remember about you?
Oh, let's see. I would say that I listen to R&B all the time. I think it speaks to the vibe. So I'm a big vibe energy person, and I think people that listen to R&B have great vibes. So that's what I want people to know about me. That is definitely not on my LinkedIn.
That's respect. You spinning scissor right now?
Yes, it has not come off repeat.
I misfire. Yo, segment two, NIL and sport creators. So again, this is an NIL education podcast. The work that you're doing at the intersection of NIL, I think is super important. We believe is extremely essential. It's not just the present, but the future of the NIL industry, particularly in the college sports setting. So can you just first tell us more about New Game Labs and particularly starting with its inception story, I guess over the last now year?
Yeah. So, I mean, looking at all things together, I feel like it did start when I started my first podcast, even though I was not starting that as a business, it was just out of passion. But I say that because like starting is so important. Starting where you are with what you have and what you know is so important. And because if you don't, it can never become something bigger. Starting that podcast around this idea of athletes and business, how athletes are building businesses, a lot of similarities to what I'm doing today. And New Game Labs is all about helping sports creators build businesses. It's just an evolved format of what I was doing before with Court to Corporate. And I start with that context because I was always passionate about that idea, dating back to like 2019. And it felt like in 2021, it just kind of like took new life, like, you know, industry wise with NIL and the creator economy, but also that just like igniting another like light or like fire of inspiration, like that similar feeling that I had when I first discovered my passion. I was like, oh shit, like this is it. And really just kind of like formulated the idea around that. And, you know, it took time, honestly, to figure out like what is that positioning though? Like I get it. And, you know, as any creative, it's like you can get it, you can see how it all comes together, but you have to be able to effectively communicate that to people in a simple way that gets to the point of like, how does this help me? So yes, there's this big vision of like athletes, creator economy, bringing the two together, but what does that mean today? And it really is this like new generation of sports creators, which athletes fit into, but it's much bigger than that, right? Of sports creators that are becoming entrepreneurs. Like that's where the creator economy is today. When we think of like creators or, you know, the creator economy coming to NIL, it's like it's not really a new concept. Like it's kind of been here for over 10 years now, and it's gone through 3 stages at this point. And the stage that it's evolved out of is this influencer marketing era. And where it's going to now is like creators becoming founders and also like startup founders. It's like it's evolving very rapidly into this new form of entrepreneurship. And so I think that business aspect of content and marketing and athlete branding is what I'm really passionate about. So that's an inspiration. What it actually looks like is getting back to podcasting, which I love being on the other side of the mic every once in a while. So the podcast, which actually recently launched, interviews people that match that profile, people that match this like big grandiose vision and are doing it today. I've been bringing them in for interviews, and season 1 is going live right now. And then also through education and providing aspiring sports creators with the tools that can help them reach those similar outcomes. And so today that's starting with the membership, which you can dive into, but that's the origin story and how it's shaping up.
At what moment did you know like it was time to take this vision forward, right? It was time to act on what you knew several years ago, then 2019, but then 2022 is like, is it? Like, what was that moment for you?
I think it was just through the constant learning I was doing. Like, I think that's another thing, like that idea could have stayed that idea, but as like a creator or a founder or someone that's in your career, you have to always be learning and always be evolving like your thinking. Because that original concept was about career transition a little bit, but because I was like always learning about the creator economy and about, these emerging industries and tech and venture capital and all this stuff, I was able to view it through a different lens. And I think like once I got that information, that's when I was like, yeah, we have to do this.
Where were you when you had that moment? The crib? Ooh. Out?
I don't know. I don't know if it was like one moment, to be honest. Like, I don't know if it was like the dream story that every founder has, like it just came to me and it happened. Like, I don't know if I had that. I think it was like gradual.
That's real, yo. So then what is it, right? For those that are still locked in with us and will obviously come across you on social, whichever platform they find you on, like what is New Game Labs? And when you answer this question, how did you even get the name?
Oh, because in all the newsletters, attempted courses I tried to do, everything had this saying, like, it is just a new game. Like what you do in sports, what you do in business, it's just a new game. And I kept saying that. Like I look back at like my old Substack post, unintentionally, I kept repeating the same phase. And then it just kind of came to me. And then at that time, like a lot of companies were starting with like labs. And I was like, it was actually originally, I'm looking at a poster I made. It was originally called New Game Studios. Wow. And then I was like, I think I like New Game Labs more, but yeah. So what is it? It's media and education. So media, podcast. I think storytelling is so important. Like storytelling for athletes, especially, like that's what inspired me to start the podcast, because I started to see, it was like 2018, and it's like every athlete's like starting their media company and podcast company or joining a podcast network. And today it's normal, but all those people that were like first movers had a huge role in changing the perception of what the athlete, investor, entrepreneur, media personality is today. Like that's the norm, but it wasn't. And storytelling changed that. Like new perspectives normalized new thinking for other people. And so I think that is my role as a creator that has a business. Like we can talk about that more too, but like the mindset shift of being a creator versus building a business as a creator. But anyways, like maintaining that philosophy that storytelling is so powerful and leading with that. And then also education. So like giving people not just like the, hey, this is so exciting. All right, go ahead. also giving people
Mhm.
like, hey, here's what you can do with this. Like, here's how you can customize this into your own personal aspirations or your own framework or playbook, etc. And so that's what a lot of the educational products and, memberships are about.
That's awesome. Yeah, I would say you model the way, right? And I think at least something that I think about both in my work, but also my research is that a lot of people educating, they've never done it.
Oh,
So someone, you know what I mean? And I don't like that. I can't listen
I
to
don't
that.
like that either.
I can't embrace that. I can't follow that, right? But you really do model the way and how you show up in the digital and physical spaces as well. But I want to really focus on two of the, practices that New Game Labs is offering, right? As far as the podcast, as well as the membership. And so we just start with the podcast, and you mentioned earlier, right, bringing on people who are really at this intersection of media and sports, if you will, but just diving deeper in regards to one, like why a podcast really again, right, back to corporate, as opposed to another platform. And then with the membership, like what is the membership? How can people continue to learn more about how to get involved? But definitely the podcast and membership before you keep going.
Yes. So I'll start with why podcasting, especially now in this time that we're in, excuse me, especially now in this time that we're in, podcasting has changed a lot. Like the podcast that I started however many years ago was like Skype audio recording, uploading to something that distributed it on Spotify and Apple Podcast, and you have a podcast. Great. You can create transcripts and quotes and all this stuff. Podcasting is very different today. If you think about social media right now, everything is prioritizing short form video. And so as a creator or as someone with a brand in general, how can you think smarter about the content that you're making? And that's why video podcasting is becoming so popular and just a part of the roadmap, to be honest. So from the podcast, and this is more so about like, I would say operationalizing what you're doing as a creator versus like the power of podcasting, but I still think it's helpful. But like from one podcast, you can get obviously a long form video and then however many short form videos you want to, like you guys are doing the same thing right now. And then you can also turn that into written content and more short form content and shorter, long form content, like all these things that you can get from one 40-minute interview. And so that is a great way to sustainably create as a creator, because what a lot of creators face is burnout. You are told, I need to post every single day for however many days a year. And the reality is that's not sustainable. And also creates without a path to like, what does this turn into? Like, how does this become something that's bigger than you? So I also think podcasting is key in order to move from like personal brand to media brand, because what I've always talked about the exact same things that I'm talking about on the podcast. I've always talked about athletes creating content. I've always talked about how to create great content on my personal channels. But the reality is, if you want to, turn this into a business that's bigger than you, it can't be like the Kirby Porter show. It has to now turn into this platform that brings other people into the brand. So those are the kind of the key, I would say, frameworks or like decisions that went into selecting a podcast. And then the membership. Oh, and also I just love podcasting. Like I love talking to people. So I also really recommend like choosing something that you enjoy and that you're good at. I could say all that. And if you don't like podcasting, don't listen to me, because you have to do what you enjoy. I've tried newsletters a bunch of times. I did not like writing a newsletter. I just
Yeah, no.
And so like my personality didn't come through. It wasn't giving. Because that's not my strength. And so you have to do what works for you. That would be the last piece I'll say on podcasting. And then the membership right now is basically about like helping sports creators take their passions to the next level, as I call it. So how can I give you a playbook to build a business of you? I created an audio course. It's called the Business of You Accelerator. And it walks someone who's like at point A of creating content through the 5 steps that they need to take to monetize their content in a way that is sustainable and aligns with, a bigger vision that they have for where they want to take their business. So that's a Business of You accelerator. And then I also think just even course dynamics are changing. So it's important to engage people after they learn. And so that's why it's in membership format and offering ongoing things that can help the people that have taken the course continue to learn and adapt and execute what they've learned.
Told you, yeah, you're OG, yo. What you're OG, feeling young. You're the OG. I'm gonna treat you like the OG as well.
No, please don't.
But no, I have to, you know that. But one thing you just mentioned, right? You talked about passion, right? How do I help you take your passion to the next level? I think, at least in this conversation, particularly talking about entrepreneurship in the traditional sense, or that's monetization, right? That's money, that's profit. And monetizing one's passion has received a lot of attention, not critique, but definitely attention and conversation in regards to, does every one of your passions need to be monetized? Does it have to be for profit, et cetera? Which goes back to something you mentioned earlier, right? As far as creators that do want to monetize, right? How do they then take their creator piece and build a business as a creator? So can you talk more about one, like that inflection point, if you will, because it's definitely a moment where people have to decide, I would argue, people have to decide, like, am I going to monetize? Am I not? Is this more social impact focused, right? So what's that moment like? And then how do you help people then pivot their thinking to, I'm sure they're moving towards that entrepreneurship direction?
Yeah. And to answer your question, like everything doesn't have to be monetized.
Agreed.
Like just because there is this big idea of the passion economy and you can monetize your passions and it's so exciting, it doesn't mean you have to. Like everything isn't applicable to every single person. And so I think it's more so this is an opportunity. And if you fit into it, it's great. If you don't, it's also great. But I think for me, or I think what I've learned is like, do you have the desire to be an entrepreneur? Like, because that's, it's kind of like an internal, very personal question, because, you can be very excited about an idea and you can see opportunity, but do you actually want to build a business and like take risk and put yourself out there and like do the hard things? Like, those are like two separate things. It's like excitement versus like actual realities of building a business. And then it also is a conscious switch of like, okay, if you're going to go from I'm creating and like just kind of like posting when I want to, or I'm on this channel and I like it's, has a lot of followers and I monetize like sometimes, to like a completely different mindset of like, okay, let me take a big step back and like think about how does this operate as a business with like, it sounds very simple, but it's a difference that you have to like draw a line in the sand of like when you're going to do it, like how we all usually do it versus like if you're going to pursue it as a business. And then the last thing I would say is like, if you do pursue your content as a business, I have learned, and it's something I went back and forth on, but I recommend separating your personal brand from your business and not having it be the same thing in its entirety. I'm obviously the host of my podcast. Like you're going to hear from me on my podcast and I'm like, very infused into the brand, but I still think it's important to maintain my personal life and all the other things that make me me. So like, I made a conscious decision, like, okay, I go super hard on LinkedIn and I'm going super hard in podcasting. But my Instagram is my personal page. You can follow me there if you want insights, but you're also going to get me having fun and living my life because I'm a person. So like, I think for the sake of your mental health, like don't make the business you, because that's not healthy.
It's really good. What are you learning about, what are you also learning about yourself in this new journey, this new phase, if you will?
Ooh, that's a great question. So much, a lot. A lot. I mean, I feel like being an entrepreneur has matured me a lot. Like I feel like I've just had to learn to a certain degree that I haven't had to before, because it's like I was talking to my friend about this the other day, around people that want to get into entrepreneurship because they don't want to work for anyone. We're like, that's not how that works.
Mhm.
And she was like, for one, you're working for yourself, so there's no one telling me what to do and what's the right thing to do and don't do this. And like, yes, I have mentors and peer mentors and all that stuff, but you have to self-educate a lot because like you're ignorance is not bliss in entrepreneurship. Like you have to figure out what you don't know and go learn it to the best of your ability and not like perfect it, but like have enough so you're able to make informed decisions. And so I think that was like the biggest thing last year. Like, yes, you have this expertise and like, yes, you have this idea and vision, but like you always need to be in a phase of learning, just like I was before. Like that doesn't stop just because you've arrived at the point of building the business. Um, what else? I would say also just like maintaining peace is
Mm.
very important. It's like you have to like go to bed each night doing that, knowing that you did what you could do that day and being okay with that and like not letting it consume you is like very important too. So I think a lot of the things I learned have been like mental health wise and personal development wise versus like how to close a deal or like stuff like that all that stuff is going to come and like it has come already. I should say but I do think like the personal lessons are very valuable.
That's really good. Second follow-up question to that then is, what do you wish more people knew about New Game Labs, right? You're very out there on purpose, which is, again, super dope and admirable, but what do you wish more people knew about New Game Labs?
Ooh, that it's not an NIL company. It's about the creator economy, and there's a difference. Um, there are two different markets with two different need spaces and education frameworks, and best, like all the ins and outs of NIL education and what's required and just how unique it is to the college athlete experience. Like that's what you guys do. That's your bread and butter. Creator economy is a different market. Is there overlap? Yes, 100%. But I think a big thing is just more education that yes, there can be something that's in sports and for athletes, and it's not NIL. And I think it's a matter of the times that we live in, where it's like NIL is everything right now. Like if you hear athlete, if you hear the words athlete and brand, people think NIL.
Oh, yeah.
But that's what we're in, and so that's why people need people like MOGL.
No,
You guys are doing it.
no, dead ass. So quick follow-up to that before I move us to segment 3, right? For athletes that may be listening to this either at the high school level, college level, or even pro level, they're like, you know what, like F this influencer marketing stuff. Like I want to move into learning more about the creator economy, right? What is your first instruction to them? Of course, after following platforms and whatnot, and signing up, listen to the podcast, signing up for the membership. Like, what's your first step of instruction for those that may listen? Like, yo, I want to walk with Kirby.
Yeah. I think my first piece of advice is a little bit of fluff, but to get in touch with like, what is your why for creating? Like what drives you to share and open up about yourself and be consistent? Because you need something deeper than like following trends or wanting to make money from it. Because I think when you start with those intents and it doesn't come as quickly as you want it to, it's very easy to give up. And so I think if you create from a place of like internal drive, like similar to your sport, like why do you get up day after day at 5, 6, 7 a.m. and go practice when no one is watching? It's because you have a very deep why for your craft and you have like a big vision for where your sport can take you. I think creators need that same thing. You need a very strong why that's bigger than a platform, that's bigger than a trend. And you also need a very strong vision for where your content can take you. So it can't just be about, it can, but I recommend it should be bigger than the content. So yes, I'm creating these things, but what can it lead to? Can it lead to me finding the right career for me after sport? Can it lead to me being an entrepreneur? Can it lead to connections? Like, what is that bigger thing that content can lead me to?
It's really good. Let me ask you this then. Like, where's New Game Labs at in the market right now, right? And I ask that not from a positioning standpoint, as far as like, best, middle, worst. Like, that's not what I'm looking at here. When I think about NIL education, I'm understanding there is overlap, but certainly difference. NIL educators are not Black predominantly. They're not women, right? They're predominantly white men. They're coming from corporate spaces. In the creator economy space, right? Like, is there a group of us, a group of y'all? Like honestly and truly, right? Because again, what I'm learning about in my own experience and journey is like how I talk about NIL education as a Black millennial educator is much different than how a white man talks about NIL education, or how I talk about branding is how I different, right? It's difference. And so I'm asking you, like, where is race and gender as far as it being diverse in the creator economy education space?
Yeah, we're definitely here. Like there are 100% people that look like us in the creator space. I would say the disparities in one industry are very similar in another in general. Like if we're looking at NIL as a microcosm, or the sports industry more broadly, or if you want to apply it to other industries, a lot of the same things that you would expect do apply. But it's something I honestly talked a lot about last year too, just the economic disparities between like Black creators and our counterparts, especially Black women and our counterparts. And so I think that's something I'm very intentional about as I'm building, is like, how can I make sure that if I'm creating a platform, that the platform looks different? Who am I interviewing? How am I ensuring that it doesn't look the same? How am I tapping into like the network that has supported me and like brought me to where I am today? So it looks like what it looks like. We're here, but it could be better. And I think that's why I'm excited to like be a founder in it, because I can be a part of changing it.
Yeah, you are. I know dude from Canada was like, yo, I need to talk to somebody in the sport creator space. Like Kirby. Everyone's
That
Kirby.
was so nice. I was like, oh my, people literally, I was like, wow, thanks guys.
I told you you're young, but you're the OG, my friend. Segment three. We're approaching 30 minutes of our conversation today. But what are 3 things you want our audience, all right, to remember and take away after our conversation together? Right, 3 takeaways.
3 takeaways. I would say 1, just the mindset shift or awareness. Can you hear that?
A little bit, yeah. Beeping.
Do you think I should pause until they go?
Oh, you're good. You're good.
It's fine. So I would say the first thing is the difference between like creating for passion and creating for entrepreneurship. Requires a little bit of like a mindset shift and also a conscious decision. The second thing is that if you are creating for entrepreneurship, think critically. Hold on.
You're good.
I hope it's not too bad. I'm just going to start that part over because I honestly couldn't hear myself think. Okay. Yes. So the first thing I would like people to take away from this conversation is the importance of starting. So just like starting somewhere on an idea and letting it form how it forms over time. Going back to the point of like, you asking me, when did New Game Lab start? And realizing, hey, it actually started when I started this podcast out of passion, and it just took new life over time. So that'd be the first thing. The second thing is the difference between like creating out of passion versus creating for entrepreneurship, really thinking about that, if you really want that. And if you do, just learning what you need to know in order to approach it effectively. And then the last thing is to listen to the New Game Labs podcast.
And where can we listen to that?
YouTube.
Love it. Love it. Kirby, anything else you want to share with us today?
That's it. I love this conversation. Thank you for asking questions I honestly haven't been asked yet about entrepreneurship.
I appreciate it, my friend. I'm not letting you go without answering two more questions. The first of which is, what is your favorite Drake album?
Oh, that's hard. Let's see. Take Care, I guess. Is that basic?
You'll be
True.
honest.
It's true. It's my
If
favorite
if
album.
it's true, all right, I'll allow. All right, most underrated album. Most underrated album.
Ooh, if you're reading this, it's too late.
Yeah, that is slept on.
Yeah.
That is slept on. And
That
then
was
this
a good time.
last, the second, it was a good time, undergrad. Second but last question: who else do we need to see and have a conversation with on the MOGL podcast?
Ooh. I hope there's editing because I don't know. I just went blank on everyone that I know. Trey Fills.
Ooh,
I just interviewed him on my podcast and he has a lot of gems.
Trey, we coming. Kirby, we appreciate you, yo.
Yes, thank you. I had a great time.
Most definitely. For everyone else, thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of the MOGL podcast. I look forward to seeing y'all next week as we continue to interview those who are making sure that our athletes are educated, not just in the NIL space, but the creator economy space. Be sure to listen to New Game Labs podcast on YouTube and follow Kirby on LinkedIn. But until then, let's get this money and get MOGL. Peace out.